honourable member for Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the member for Edmonton East for bringing this motion forward. Mr. Speaker, we know that every city has its own method of calculating the number of homeless, but this can lead to varying results that make it rather difficult to plan adequately and to meet the needs of the homeless. What this motion does, Mr. Speaker, is to recommend a standardized point-in-time approach for use in communities across the country to measure homelessness. The goal is to provide communities with the tools that they need to implement a consistent homeless count. As my colleagues also pointed out, under the renewed homelessness partnering strategy, the government is adopting a housing first approach to homelessness. Housing first gives people who are homeless a place to live immediately and permanently, and then gives them the necessary supports to improve the other aspects of their lives. In many cases, this means getting them help, whether for addiction or a mental or a physical illness, so that they can get back on their feet and lead productive lives. The recent Mental Health Commission of Canada's pilot project, the At Home Chez Soi project, demonstrated that the Housing First approach rapidly reduces homelessness while alleviating pressure on shelter, health, police, and judicial services. Mr. Speaker, we are incredibly proud of this policy shift. Through the pilot project, we now have that Housing First rapidly ends homelessness and leads to other positive outcomes for quality of life. We also know that it is a sound financial investment that can lead to significant cost savings. For those participants that were in the highest needs, every $10 invested led to an average savings of $21.72. We also know that it works over a length of time. So for the Housing First group, an average of 73% of participants were in stable housing in comparison to 32% for the usual care group over the course of the study. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, we're very proud of this policy shift because these are the strongest results that we've ever seen in an attempt to reduce homelessness. Communities with Housing First funding targets under the homelessness partnering strategy will be required to implement an initial point-in-time count. But the standardized point-in-time approach can be used by any community wishing to do such a count. The count will determine baseline levels of homelessness. This standard PIT method will allow us to track changes in the Canadian homeless population and local communities to adjust their programs to prevent and to reduce homelessness. The PIT approach is widely used in the United States and Australia to track changes in levels of homelessness and to measure the success of efforts to reduce it. Now, in a recent report to Congress, Mr. Speaker, the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Agency used national PIT results to demonstrate their efforts to reduce homelessness since 2010. And also, Mr. Speaker, the count will give us a much clearer idea of the overall extent of the problem. When communities use a PIT approach to better understand the demographics of their homeless population, for example, how many veterans, Aboriginals, seniors, or young people who are homeless, they will better be able to reach out to these groups and to provide the support that they need to get that stable housing. Now, since 2006, Mr. Speaker, our government has worked with communities across Canada to develop local solutions to homelessness. Whereas the approach to the problem was once fragmented, our leadership has helped mobilize a more cohesive and a more effective response. With the launch of the Point-in-Time initiative, the federal government will help communities shift away from a focus on emergency aid to the homeless towards longer-term solutions. So this approach is an integral part of the National Homelessness Strategy, which acknowledges that communities are best placed to address local homelessness issues and that the federal government's role is to support them in finding local solutions. Mr. Speaker, the Point-in-Time initiative simply makes sense. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.